All right, so you've given us a ton of stuff to work with on the 2016 Assassin's Creed movie. We've got the main IMDb page, cast and crew lists, some fun facts, the FAQ, and a whole range of user reviews, some positive, some negative.
Really gives us a lot to dig into.
Yeah. And what we want to do today is really try to get a deep dive into all of this and pull out some of the most interesting insights about the movie.
Sounds good.
You know, not just a simple review, like is it good or bad, but like really understand what this film is, how it was made, and what people thought about it.
I like it.
All based on what you sent us.
Awesome.
So I think one of the first things that we need to talk about is from the IMDb FAQ, is that this film isn't actually a direct adaptation of any of the games.
Right.
It's like an expansion of the Assassin's Creed universe.
Yeah, it's more of a standalone story. You know, it introduces a new assassin. It does have some connections to the broader mythology, but it's not a direct adaptation of any particular game, which kind of sets it apart. Makes you think about how it fits in with the rest of the franchise.
Exactly. Okay, so just some basic facts, right? The movie came out in 2016. It's rated PG-13, which is interesting. It's a pretty action-packed film. I mean, there's a lot of violence in the games, too, so...
Makes sense.
You know, maybe that makes sense.
Sure.
It runs an hour and 55 minutes, which is... I don't know if that's long for this type of film.
Kind of standard these days, I guess,
Yeah.
for a big action movie, yeah.
And the basic story, according to IMDb, involves this guy named Callum Lynch, and he's able to explore the memories of his ancestor, Cotillard.
From 15th century Spain.
From 15th century Spain. So we've got some historical fiction here.
Definitely.
Through this connection, he gains the skills of a master assassin.
The whole genetic memory thing, right?
Right. That's a key concept in the whole franchise.
Yeah.
And then he ends up taking on the Templars in the present day.
Classic Assassin's Creed conflict.
Yeah.
Assassins versus Templars playing out across centuries.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the central conceit of the film is this whole idea that our past, our ancestors' experiences are somehow encoded in us.
I mean, it's a cool idea, right? To think that we carry those echoes of history within us.
Definitely. All right, so let's talk about who made this movie. Justin Kurzel was the director.
Interesting choice.
Yeah. The screenplay was written by Michael Leslie, Adam Cooper, and Bill Collage. But it's based, of course, on the Assassin's Creed video game series, which was originally created by Corey May, Jade Raymond, and Patrice Désilets.
Although, if you look at the movie's writing credits, the game creators aren't listed. It kind of makes you wonder how involved they actually were in the adaptation process.
Yeah, and you know, we see that a lot with adaptations, especially from video games. It's not always a direct line from the original creators to the film version.
Right, different mediums, different demands. It's not uncommon for screenwriters to come in and, tailor the story specifically for cinema, which sometimes leads to sometimes it leads to changes from the source material.
Right, and maybe that's a question we'll come back to later is, how faithful does an adaptation need to be? How much creative license should the filmmakers have? But that's a topic for another time.
Definitely worth exploring.
Okay, let's talk about the cast.
All right.
So Michael Fassbender, he's the big name, right? He plays both Callum Lynch, the present-day assassin, and Aguilar, his ancestor in 15th century Spain.
That dual role must have been a challenge.
And I think he actually did a pretty good job with it. We'll see what the reviews say later, but I think it was a good casting choice.
Yeah, he's definitely a talented actor.
And he wasn't just the star, he was also a producer on the film.
Oh, wow.
So that shows a real level of commitment to the project.
Definitely not just showing up and saying lines. He was invested.
Exactly. And then we've got Marion Cotillard playing Sophia.
Another strong actor, yeah.
Yeah, and Jeremy Irons as Wrynn.
Always brings a certain intensity to his roles.
Yes. And then, there's a whole bunch of other talented people in the cast. Brendan Gleeson, Charlotte Rampling, Michael Kenneth Williams.
A lot of familiar faces.
Yeah, it's a really strong ensemble cast. And what's kind of interesting is that Kurzel, the director, Fassbender, and Cotillard, they all worked together on a film adaptation of Macbeth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a few years before this. So there was already a kind of creative shorthand between them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it probably made a difference in how they worked together on this film.
I would imagine so. It always helps to have that established trust and rapport when you're tackling a project like this.
Definitely. Okay, so let's move on to some of the more, the technical aspects of the film.
Sure.
The trivia section on IMDb highlights this one stunt. It's the highest free fall done by a stuntman in like 35 years. This guy, Damien Walters, fell 125 feet.
Whoa, that's nuts.
Yeah, hit an impact speed of 61 miles per hour.
That's a serious commitment to practical effects, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And Fassbender and Ariane Leavitt, who plays Maria, they did like 95% of their own stunts, too.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they're both really committed.
That's impressive.
And the costumes for the assassins, all handcrafted, took 2-3 months to make each one.
No kidding.
And they had 8 different versions of each costume. I mean, the level of detail is insane.
Wow. So not only the action, but also the visual design really dedicated to authenticity?
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about what people thought of the movie.
Let's hear it.
Now, the IMDb rating, it's a 5.6 out of 10,
Huh.
which, is not great.
Not terrible, but not great either.
Yeah, it's kind of middle of the road.
Kind of lukewarm.
And that's based on over 213,000 ratings. So a lot of people have seen this movie and have opinions.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant sample size.
Yeah. So some people really liked it. Some of the things that people praised were the action sequences, which we just talked about how amazing
They were those stunts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The acting, particularly Fassbender, Cotillard, and Irons, they were all mentioned a lot.
It sounds like even if the movie itself was divisive, the cast was generally well received.
Yeah, people seem to like the performances, and also visually, the cinematography, the way the Animus was portrayed. Some of the visuals were really striking.
It's interesting how different people focus on different things. For some, it's the action. For others, it's the performances. For others, it's the visuals.
Yeah, and there were a couple of reviewers who stood out to me. One of them hadn't even played the games, and they said that they found the plot easy to follow, which is interesting because some other people found it confusing.
Huh.
But this person enjoyed the action and, thought the cinematography and the performances were good. So it seems like even if you weren't familiar with the games, you could still find things to enjoy in the movie.
Yeah, it sounds like it worked on some level as a standalone action film.
Exactly. And then there was another reviewer who was a fan of the games, and they enjoyed seeing the classic setting of the Assassin's Creed world, the historical Spain, and they liked how the movie kind of explained the mythos, the background, for people who might not be familiar.
So it tried to cater to both audiences, the fans and the newcomers.
Yeah, but, not everyone was happy. There were a lot of people who were disappointed.
Oh, yeah. What were they saying?
Well, a lot of the criticisms focused on the script. People felt like it was weak or confusing or that the characters weren't developed enough, especially Aguilar.
That's a shame, considering he's such a key figure in the story.
Yeah, and a lot of people felt like the movie just didn't really capture the spirit of the games. Like it had the action, it had the visuals, but it was missing something.
The heart of it, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, and some people thought the plot was oversimplified.
That's a common complaint with adaptations, right? That they have to condense things, and sometimes that leads to simplification.
And then there was the Apple of Eden, which is a really important object in the Assassin's Creed lore. Some people felt like its significance wasn't explained well enough.
So some issues with pacing and exposition, maybe.
Yeah, and the way the film jumped back and forth between the present day and the past, that didn't work for everyone.
Oh, so some structural issues as well.
Yeah, one reviewer even said that the past sequences felt almost unnecessary.
Wow.
Like they didn't really add anything to the story. And other people felt like the movie just tried to do too much, like it was trying to cram in all this lore and mythology and action, and it just ended up feeling muddled.
So maybe a bit overstuffed, trying to pack too much in.
Yeah, maybe. And then, a lot of people felt like the cast was wasted. Like they had all these amazing actors, but the script didn't really give them much to work with.
That's always a disappointment, to see talent underutilized.
And some people even thought the movie felt like it was setting up sequels, rather than being a satisfying standalone film.
Like it was more concerned with world building and franchise potential than telling a complete story in its own right.
Exactly. And it's interesting because there were plans for sequels, but they never happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's kind of like this movie's all we got.
Huh.
Now, there were some specific things that reviewers pointed out that I thought were interesting. For example, the Animus. In the games, it's like this bed-like thing, but in the movie, it's more like a VR-style arm.
Yeah, I remember noticing that.
And one reviewer initially didn't like that change, but they said that it actually ended up being pretty visually effective and that it worked for the story. So even though it was different from the games, it still worked in the context of the film.
It's a good example of how adaptations sometimes need to make changes, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes those changes work, sometimes they don't.
Exactly. And then there was another reviewer who pointed out this inconsistency with the games.
Oh, yeah.
About the assassins cutting off their ring finger.
Oh, right.
And the movie actually addresses this. They say that it's just a symbolic practice for the Spanish Brotherhood.
Interesting. So they were aware of the lore and tried to find a way to reconcile it.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of cool. Okay, so box office-wise, the movie didn't do that great.
Really?
It had a budget of $125 million, which is a lot of money.
That's huge.
Yeah, and it only grossed $54.6 million in the U.S. and Canada.
Oof, that's rough.
Yeah, its opening weekend was only $10.2 million.
Not a great start.
So, not great. But it did make $240.6 million worldwide.
Okay, so it made its money back, but not with a ton to spare.
Right. So, commercially it wasn't a huge success, but it wasn't a complete flop either.
Kind of a mixed bag, like the review.
So to sum up, this deep dive into Assassin's Creed shows that it's a movie with some really ambitious ideas, a really talented cast and crew, and some incredible action.
Yeah, the stunts were wild.
But, it also got a lot of criticism for the story and for how it adapted the game. So it's a movie of contrasts, for sure.
Seems like it.
I think what's really interesting about this whole deep dive is that it shows the challenges of adapting something like a video game into a movie. You've got this big, complex world, you've got a lot of lore, you've got fans who are really passionate about the source material.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, pleasing the fans while also making a movie that works for people who aren't familiar with the games.
Exactly. And in this case, it seems like the filmmakers tried to find a middle ground. They didn't want to just rehash a story from the games, but they also wanted to stay true to the spirit of the franchise.
It's a tightrope walk.
Yeah, and it's not easy, and the reviews kind of reflect that. Some people appreciated the originality, while others felt like the movie strayed too far from what they loved about the games.
It makes you think about what makes a good adaptation. Is it about fidelity to the source material, or is it about capturing the essence of the story in a new way?
So for you, the listener, what does all of this mean? Well, if you're wondering if the Assassin's Creed movie is a good way to get into the franchise, I think the answer is complicated.
Yeah, it's not a simple yes or no.
It gives you a taste of the world, it introduces the Assassins and the Templars, it shows you the whole genetic memory concept, but it does it in a way that a lot of people found flawed.
So maybe not the ideal starting point, but still a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And if you're a fan of the games, I think you might have a mixed reaction. There are things to enjoy, but there are also things that might frustrate you.
Like you said, a movie of contrasts.
But I think what this deep dive really highlights is the difficulty of adapting video games to the big screen. There's this tension between trying to make a good movie for everyone and trying to satisfy the fans. And it's not always clear how to strike that balance.
Yeah, and Assassin's Creed is a perfect example of that. It's a visually stunning film with some great action and a talented cast, but the story and the adaptation itself divided people.
And I think this raises an important question for you, the listener, to think about: how much creative freedom should filmmakers have when they're adapting something?
It's a good question.
Like, is it more important to be faithful to the original work, or is it okay to take some risks and try something new?
I don't think there's a right answer.
Yeah. I mean, some adaptations are very faithful, and they're great, and some adaptations are very different from the source material, and they're also great. So it really depends.
It's a case-by-case thing.
Yeah. But Assassin's Creed is a really interesting example of this debate because it tried to do something different, and it didn't quite work for everyone.
It's food for thought, for sure.
So one last thought for you to ponder. They were planning to make a trilogy of Assassin's Creed movies, but it never happened. So what if they had taken a different approach?
Like what?
What if they had made it a TV series?
Oh, that could have been interesting.
Yeah,
More time to flesh out the story, explore the characters, dive into the lore.
exactly. Or what if they had adapted one of the games more directly?
Yeah, like a faithful retelling of one of the fan favorite storylines.
Yeah. I mean, the potential was there, but for whatever reason, they decided to go in a different direction, and it didn't quite work out the way they hoped.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what could have been.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the 2016 Assassin's Creed movie.
A fascinating exploration.
A lot to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for bringing this one to us.
Thanks for listening.